This is a fanfiction written with as many tropes as possible, inspired none other by Crystal Scherer herself, the brilliant author of Merfolk on Mars and other stories. If you read any of her novels thanks to this fanfiction, please be sure to start with Merfolk on Mars. Simply imagining Crystal's face, or the emojis and reaction gifs she sends in response, upon realizing her impact on others like me brings tears to my eyes. I can only hope I do her works justice with this humble story, my first ever fanfiction written on Wattpad. Without further ado, welcome to Sealantis. My name is Millie Marino, and I am cousin of King Trident, daughter of the great Ursula and chosen one of the Sealians. This is the story of how Sealantis came to be, and who Sealantians were before Merfolk lived on Mars. Well, before King Trident sent out promising mechanical geniuses off to Braslantis and Merfolk settled in on a watery moon near Mars. We don't actually live on Mars since it's way too inhospitable for us, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I do that a lot at the ripe old age of 37 after all. Once upon a time in a land far, far away, I lived on a planet called Earth. We lived in cities that everyone saw on screen, and while it was rather pretty in some areas, the leaders of planet Earth did not know how to run things. Instead of being on each other's teams, the rulers of planet Earth chose to live in castles they refused to let go to ruin, at the cost of the lives around them. By the time I was born, my father's homeland of Florida had been submerged under the sea. Islands became rolling waves of trash, choking out the natural ocean life, and most people resorted to living inland for fear of trashnadoes. They're like Sharknadoes, but made of trash instead. Most girls my age didn't worry about the future, though. They were more worried about their looks and popularity, giggling over boys like Harry and Edward. I wasn't like the other girls, though. I was different. And not just because I didn't care about Harry's messy black hair and troublemaking smirk with clear green orbs that twinkled with amusement over a joke he was about to tell, with that dimple in his left cheek right next to his chiseled cheekbone. I didn't swoon over Edward's sculpted muscles that rippled every time he raised his hand in class, or daydream about wearing his sweatshirt and watching scary movies together where he would wrap his strong, tanned arms around my petite frame and cover my eyes so I wouldn't be scared. That would be silly, because I've known them ever since we were basically babies. I definitely did not have a crush on either of them. No, I was different because I like to read books and practice swordplay in my free time. But I guess most girls didn't have dead parents like me either. When I was just 6 years old, both of my parents died in a horrific car crash. It wasn't the impact that killed them, though. There are these people with sideways blinking eyes and green-tinted skin that brandish swords at them, challenging my parents, Sandane, Caspian, Marino, to a duel to the death. Being totally normal people, they didn't have swords and were skewered to death by those weird people whom I would end up calling Sealians because they look like sea creatures who are also aliens. Ever since that day, I vowed I would become the best swordswoman in the world and avenge my parents. Being just 6 years old, I don't remember much from the crash, but I still have recurring nightmares of the Sealians. I visited the psychiatrist more often than I've gotten good grades, which is saying something because I always get straight A's. In fact, I met my best friend Nikki in group therapy once. She stole me my first sword, taught me how to pick locks with the bronze hairpin that I've kept to this day, and even let me in on her favorite explosive concoctions she dreamed of one day combining with a rutabaga. That was before the therapists realized we had met each other and separated us for life for fear of us overthrowing the government, but those 3 hours with Nikki were the most fun I'd ever had. Anyway, I was studying in the library with Harry and Edward because we had a group project to work on that was due this Friday when I learned of the first big event that would cause the end of the world as we knew it. "Oh my gosh!" I screamed in horror. The librarian shushed me, but I didn't care. "The lakes! They're draining the lakes!" Harry and Edward leaned forward in unison, their eyebrows knit together in concern. "That's terrible, Millie Badilly," Harry exclaimed passionately, using my pet nickname he's used for me since we were kids. "How can they do that?" he added inquisitively. Edward sighed heavily, his fringe falling dramatically in front of his left eye. I loved when he did that, but I hardly noticed it this time because of my anguish for the lakes that were being drained. Those were real clams perishing. It's the dang Pulicantics. Ever since the last election, global warming has really worsened. Edward punctuated this with a toss of his messy jet black hair. "Along with pollution," Harry inserted helpfully. Edward nodded, and his hair moved mesmerizingly with the motion. "I'll bet planet Earth will die before we graduate." I stood suddenly, my heart filled with determination and passion that I had not known since vowing to avenge my parents. "Not if I have anything to say about it," I declared confidently. I gathered my books and left the room, Harry and Edward trailing behind me. We got about 2 steps out of the library before a horrible sound started screeching. I stumbled, Harry catching me easily. "Whoa," he growled. "You okay, Millie Badilly?" He studied me before taking my books from my hands. "Yeah," I managed, biting my lip and tucking a stray hair behind my ear. Harry just held me. Stay cool, stay cool, I screamed excitedly inside my head. Well, I am certainly not! A deep, booming voice resounded behind us. First you yell in my library, and now you're trying to steal books? What is wrong with you? This is a library. You don't even have to pay for books. Air conditioning, Wi-Fi, bathrooms, yet you still try to manage and steal from an innocent library? That's detention for you, Millie Marino. And Harry, Edward, I thought better of you. Do better, or I'll report this to your coaches. I gasped dramatically. You can't suspend me. I have to save the world. The librarian crossed his arms grumpily. And talking back, no less, that's another day in suspension for you, young lady. If I could, I would call your parents and tell them just how much of a disappointment you are. My mouth was open like the poor, thirsty fish that were currently dying thanks to the government draining the lakes. This is discrimination, I yelled angrily. The librarian didn't even turn back around to face me. Oh yeah? Discrimination against what? The clams! The poor clams didn't ask to be killed, and I won't let them. I'll save the clams. I'll save them all! I sobbed tearfully. Harry and Edward murmured in agreement, and I stood a little taller knowing they had my back. You can't keep me here in suspension if I'm not a student. I quit! I turned around on my heel and strode confidently through the doors once more, this time prepared for the alarm. But it never came. I cast a glance over my shoulder to see Harry and Edward dumping the books on the floor before sauntering out towards me in the lobby, mischievous smirks adorning their faces. So, Millie Badilly, Harry began casually. Where do we go from here? How do we save the clams? Edward asked caringly. I straightened my shoulders. Isn't it obvious? We go straight to the problem. It's time for a little field trip. But first, the bathroom. The girls' bathroom on the third floor wasn't anything special. The second stall didn't close right, the third toilet rarely flushed right, and the place overall had an awful smell. Only freshmen used this toilet, and that was a mistake they only made twice before taking alternate routes into other bathrooms on other floors. In other words, it was perfect for hiding my secret stash of secret stuff. Nikki had taught me to always be prepared for the unexpected, so I made sure I kept a change of clothes, some emergency rations, a few weapons I've collected over the years, and a couple $100 in cash that I'd pickpocketed from kids during lunch. We were all going to die. The freshmen could afford to miss lunch. As the boys finished changing, I stared into my reflection. Green orbs stared back, framing long, curly eyelashes and a dusting of freckles across my nose and cheeks. I had chestnut brown hair that reached my butt, which I usually did up expertly in a ponytail to keep it out of my face. I had changed out of my blue and khaki uniform and into a black hoodie and dark gray joggers. My shoes were black sneakers that had wheels installed into the heels in case of a high-speed chase in need of tailgating. My thoughts were interrupted by Harry and Edward emerging from their respective stalls, now adorned in matching black hoodies, black sweatpants, and black sneakers. We were ready to take on the world, or save it. Whichever came first. Okay, now we're more inconspicuous, we can sneak around places more easily. That doesn't mean we should let our guards down. While I was speaking, I casually tossed a spear to Harry and a bow and arrow to Edward. I won't let anyone I love die because they're unarmed ever again. You know how to use these? Not really, no, Harry said in that frustratingly beautiful British accent. No, Edward admitted. I sighed gustily. Did I teach you nothing in the last 2 years? I shoved the door open and jerked my head towards the hallway, motioning to the boys that they should get moving. Fine, we're heading to the woods to learn some basic fighting skills, and then we're going straight to the problem. A girl with curly blonde hair materialized at my elbow. Problem? What problem? What's going on? How did you get those swords in here? Who are you killing? I sighed even more gustily, and the blonde's curls were swept backwards slightly. The blonde wrinkled her nose. Ew! Were you eating onions like apples again, Millie? That's just gross. Not that I'm judging you, although I guess I am. Who does that? Oh, hi, Eddie. Harry. She giggled nervously and tucked a strand of her curly blonde hair behind her ear. Hey, Eddie greeted neutrally. Harry gave the sup nod and ran his hand through his hair. Hi, Andromeda, I said through gritted teeth. Will you go away if I said I did eat an onion like an apple? Andromeda pursed her lips and thought. Nope. I want to know where you're going with those weapons. I groaned. Figures we had to run into the one freshman who still hadn't figured out to avoid the third floor bathrooms. As the little sister to Trident, swimming team captain and senior of New Haven High, Andromeda had an unfortunate case of being spoiled and had, for some reason, decided that I was the coolest student at school. Not anymore, though. I quit school. Like I said, I'm not like other girls. Okay, I began in an overly patient tone. The world is ending, the lakes are being drained, and poor innocent clams are dying every second we spend stuck in a stupid excuse for a daycare. Andromeda's face fell. The clams are dying? If there was one person who cared more about sea life than me, it was Andromeda. Her face crumpled like someone had killed her parents, an expression I used to wear as a kid. I was a teenager now, though. couldn't afford to be bothered by my parents' gruesome murders anymore. I had to be strong and brave and make a difference so that other girls didn't lose their parents to sword-wielding lunatics. So the clams didn't have to die. Yes, the clams. So, you can either stay here with the rest of the school and wait out the end of the world as we know it, while hundreds if not thousands of innocent clams die, I intoned, dangerously calm as Andromeda began to cry. Or you can come with us and train and make a difference and save the clams. Andromeda burst into tears and clung to me. I'm coming with you. We have to save the clams. I nodded. I'd expected this, as annoying as the situation was. But let's get you your own weapon, huh, Andy? If you're a masochist who would like to read the rest of the story as it gets updated, I will upload a new chapter Mondays and Fridays to Wattpad at Millie McBug.